Elsha is a 5 mana commander, 2 colorless, and just sky colors. She is a 3/3 with prowess. Prowess says whenever you cast a non creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast non creature spells from the top of your library. If you cast a spell this way, you may cast it as though it has flash. These are very interesting abilities. I originally got the idea for this deck from Commander's Quarters. That's a beautiful budget deck. I'm going to put links in the description. The idea is you want to cast a lot of artifacts off the top of your library. You want to run cost reducers to be able to cast these artifacts for free or near to free. And you want to keep going until Elsha becomes huge and take players out in 1 or 2 turns. So very powerful idea. It can be a very busted deck. This deck is probably high 3, even a 4. It's not tuned for CEDH play, but I'm sure that is easily doable with the right cards. So very fun commander to play. One thing I will caution, the turns can take very long as you are storming off with artifacts. So you probably want to warm the table just in case you have people who are not very patient. So other than that, very fun mechanic with this commander. So another very important card I want to lead with that is Aetherflux Reservoir. With your commander, you're trying to cast a lot of artifacts in one go, in one turn. And Aetherflux Reservoir gives you an increasing amount of life as you cast spells. And if you pay 50 life, you can deal 50 damage to target creature or player. So you can one-shot someone with this card. So it's very powerful. Next part of the strategy is to make sure that when you cast spells from the top of your library, you do not stop. Things that stop you need to be removed from the top of your library. Basically, creature spells and lands will stop you from proceeding. So there are a few cards that let you deal with those. A couple of creatures that help you do that are Artificer's Assistant. It's a 1/1 flyer. Whenever you cast a historic spell, scry 1. Artifacts are historic. So the idea is you cast a spell with the scry on the stack. You can still anyway look at the top with Elsha. So basically you want to dig deeper. A lot of the deck works around this principle. Another similar card is Riddlesmith. It's a 2 mana 2/1 Artificer. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So here, instead of scrying away the card that is stopping your engine, you would draw it and discard something else. So these two are very powerful effects in the deck. The deck requires a bunch of cost reducers to try and make your artifacts free or near free. Sembless Anvil is a 3 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a non-land card from your hand. You would typically exile an artifact. Spells you cast that share a card type with the exiled card cost 2 less. Most of the artifacts here in this deck are 2 or 1 mana. There are a few 3 or 4 mana artifacts. So overall, this is a hugely powerful effect in the deck. Cloud Key. As it enters, you may choose artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, or sorcery. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 colorless less to cast. Ethereum Sculptor. Artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. Foundry Inspector. Artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. Joyrus Familiar. Historic spell cost 1 less to cast, so it helps even with Elsha. After the cost reduces, you want to also keep the engine going in another fun way. Retract. Return all artifacts you control to their owner's hand. So if you have played out a bunch of artifacts and say you're stuck at a point, effects such as Retract will let you put all of those back in your hand. Make sure you had enough mana to play out maybe the cost reducers first, cast the rest for free or near free just to keep the engine going. Rebuild. Return all artifacts to their owner's hand. Also, it cycles for 2 to draw that top card if you need to. Paradoxical Outcome is a bit more expensive, 4 mana, but it says return any number of target non-land, non-token permanents you control to their owner's hand and then draw a card for each such card returned. So it manipulates the top deck by drawing away those cards, but also gives you some gas to keep going by putting some selected, maybe cheap artifacts back to your hand. So very good effect. The same thing from graveyard can be done with a card named Drafna's Restoration. It's a 1 mana blue sorcery. Take any number of artifacts of your choice from target player's graveyard and put them on top of that player's library in any order. There are quite a few cheap eggs in the deck that you, when they enter, you draw a card, or you crack them to draw a card. So those are very nice to put back from the graveyard on top so you can keep going. There is a mass graveyard recursion effect with Dance of the Mans. It is an X spell with Azorius colors. Return up to X target artifact or non-aura enchantments, each with converted mana cost X or less, from your graveyard to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, they are 4/4 creatures in addition to their other types. The 6 or more and making them creatures is not strictly necessary, but it is good plus to have. But the idea of getting back all your eggs, stacking up all those triggers to keep going, is a very, very powerful effect. Next up, let us look at some equipment. A 1 mana equipment, Shadow Spear, equips for 2, gives the creature +1/+1, trample, and lifelink. This gives Elsha evasion. And then for 1 colorless mana, permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves let you protect your commander. Leering Emblem is a new include. I am still trying it out, but it looks like fun. It's a 2 mana equipment. Whenever you play a spell, equipped creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Elsha already has prowess, but that gives it +1/+1 on each artifact casting. But Leering Emblem with Elsha gives it +3/+3 for every artifact you cast, requiring you to go less deeper when you attack. Then we have a bunch of mana rocks. This deck actually runs only 34 lands total because there's a lot of rocks, and the rocks themselves trigger Elsha and add mana to keep going. So let's take a look at a few of those. Everflowing Chalice, Soul Ring, Felwar Stone, Azorius Signet, Arcane Signet, Thought Vessel, Mind Stone also lets you draw a card. Talisman of Creativity, Talisman of Conviction, Chromatic Lantern fixes your mana and adds 1 mana itself. Cursed Mirror adds red mana, but it can also enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature without targeting, and it might be good to copy a particularly nasty creature an opponent has. This deck probably does not have a lot of creatures you want to copy, but in a pinch you could copy some of your cost reducing creatures. So it's a very powerful ability. Commander Sphere, Hedron Archive also draws cards. Thran Dynamo or Vibranium Dynamo, it adds 3 mana immediately. It's very nice 4 mana effect. Next we have a very high impact card here, Mana Vault. It adds 3 colorless mana. And then finally Metalworker. So for 3 mana, it's a 1/2 artifact creature. You can tap it to reveal any number of artifact cards in your hand and add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool for each card revealed this way. Next up, we have a bunch of artifacts that allow you to manipulate the top of your deck. Dark Steel Pendant lets you look at the top of your library and put it on the bottom. Prophetic Prism draws a card and filters. Tectonic Reformation is an interesting enchantment. Each land card in your hand has cycling for red mana, and it itself has cycling for 2 colorless. You tend to end up getting a bunch of lands in your way in your hand as you try to filter away the top that you cannot play, and those lands in a pinch can be cycled away to keep the engine going. So that's why I think this is a good include in the deck. Wayfarer's Bauble is actually a ramp, but because it shuffles the library, it also deals with the top of your library. Glaring Spotlight. Creatures your opponent control with hexproof can become the target of spells and abilities you control as though they didn't have hexproof. This is a static ability, but it has a second more interesting ability. For 3 mana, you can sacrifice it, and creatures you control gain hexproof and become unblockable this turn. Sentinel Totem enters to scry, and then you can deal with some graveyards by exiling it. Aether Spellbomb, sack it, unsummon a creature, and sack it to draw a card. Prized Statue is a pseudo ramp. When it enters or leaves the battlefield, you make a treasure token. Mishra's Bauble, look at the top card of player's library, draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Codex Shredder, World Map, you can sack it to find a basic or a non-basic land for different costs. Traveler's Amulet, you can sack it to find a basic land to your hand. Key to the City, you can tap it to discard a card and up to one target creature can't be blocked this turn. This is very good with your commander. And when it becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Perpetual Timepiece allows you to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and you can exile it to shuffle any number of specifically targeted cards from your graveyard to your library. Mirage Mirror can copy a target artifact or creature or enchantment or land until end of turn. I typically end up copying one of my cost reducers with this. Pyxis of Pandemonium, each player exiles the top card of his or her library face down. You have another ability, I have never used that. Scrabbling Claws, target player exiles a card from their graveyard, but you can sack it for 1 mana to exile a card and then draw a card. Next we have Scroll Rack. This is a 2 mana artifact. For 1 mana, you can exile any number of cards from your hand face down, put that many cards from the top of your library into your hand, and then put the exiled live cards back on top. So basically switch your hand with the top of your library and stack the top so that you can keep going. Candy Trail is an interesting 1 mana food clue. When it enters, scry 2, and that's the important part. With the scry on the stack, you can do some shenanigans here. And then you can also sack it to gain 3 life and draw a card. Fountain Port Bell, when it enters, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, shuffle, and put it on top. This does put a land card on top, but it could take away a bunch of cards you don't want if you have looked at them with, say, Scroll Rack. So this is a very powerful effect. And then you can still sack it to draw away that land that you put on top. Lembas is a very fun card. It's a 2 mana artifact food. When it enters, scry 1 and then draw a card, which is very nice. And then for 2 mana, you can sack it and gain 3 life. But importantly, when it is put into a graveyard, you get to shuffle it back into your library, so you can stack it such that you do it when you don't like the card on top. So very fun card. And the MVP of the deck after Elsha is Sensei's Divining Top. Sensei's Divining Top is a 1 mana artifact which says, for 1 mana, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order, thereby trying to manipulate the top as much as you can to keep going. But you can also draw it and then put Sensei's Divining Top back on top of its library. This goes infinite with Elsha. If you have 1 cost reducer, then you can just Sensei's Divining Top, draw the card you need, keep going until you have accumulated enough value to attack. So Sensei's Divining Top is the MVP in the deck after Elsha. Next up, we want to have ways to find some of these powerful cards. Usually it is Sensei's Divining Top. Enlightened Tutor, you can search for an artifact or enchantment card and reveal that card to all players and then put the card on top of your library. Whir of Invention is an instant with Improvise, so your non-mana rock artifacts can help to cast that spell. And for X mana, you can search for an artifact card for X or less and put it onto the battlefield. So for Sensei's Divining Top, for example, you would need 1 and 3 blue mana. The 3 blue mana is important to note. You want to prioritize fetching blue lands when you are able to fetch them. Next, we have a very interesting enchantment that costs 2 mana. It has an ability for 1 blue, discard an artifact card from your hand, search your library for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less, reveal that card and put it into your hand. Once again, Sensei's Divining Top is a very good card to get. However, there are a lot of other good 1 mana artifacts that you have seen. Shadow Spear, for example. Reshape, X and 2 blue. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact. search your library for an artifact card with mana X or less and put it onto the battlefield. So these are your ways to find the most powerful pieces in your deck. Next, we have very limited interactions. You really want to not present a threat with Elsha until you have some momentum going. But in the meanwhile, if you do need to interact, you want to have some non-creatures ways of interacting. So we have Dispatch, which will tap a target creature, but usually you will have Metalcraft, so you will exile it. Then you have Swords to Plowshares. And then I run Mana Drain because I have a copy, but really a counterspell or a good negate is also okay. It honestly might not also be needed because this does stop the engine. So it can go either ways. Next up, there are some important tricks that you can run to actually try and make the wins more consistent. So one of them is a sorcery, Seize the Day. It's a 4 mana spell which says untap target creature. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. And it's very powerful because it also has a flashback for 3. So in theory, you can get up to 3 combat steps with an already powerful Elsha. So this can be game finishing. Next, there is a very fun card, Mana Severance. For 2 mana, search your library for any number of land cards and remove them from the game. Shuffle your library afterwards. This takes away all the dead cards, or rather most of the dead cards in your library, and this would be very strategic to do when you have enough mana with your rocks and lands to try and finish the game. Next up, we have some lands. One of the very useful lands is Urza's Saga. It has multiple chapters. It gains add a colorless mana. Chapter 2 says create a colorless construct which gets buffed with each artifact you control. So it makes a pretty big construct actually. But on chapter 3, you can search your library for an artifact card with mana 0 or 1 and put it onto the battlefield. So it's also a tutor effect on chapter 3. Next up, we have an MDFC, Kazul's Fury. On the back side, it is a tap land, so it can take up a land spot. But on the front, it's an instant for 3 mana. You can sack a creature as an additional cost to cast it, and the spell deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. So basically a fling effect on a land. Since Elsha can become pretty big, this is a very good card in the deck. Next up, I have a few lands that let you manipulate the top of your library. Those are all the different fetches. For example, Evolving Wilds. Every time you fetch a basic, you shuffle your library. Fabled Passage, Scalding Tarn, Arid Mesa. You can land cycle with Ash Barrens. Then you run a bunch of lands that you can fetch with these: Hallowed Fountain, Prairie Stream, Sacred Foundry, Clifftop Retreat, Deserted Beach, Sun Below Verge. City of Brass is a pain land, but it taps for any color. Aether Hub is interesting. It taps for any color for 1 turn, but it does enter untapped and at the very least adds a colorless mana. Glimmer White taps for 1 mana of any color, but you have to sack it if you do not control any artifacts. Spire of Industry is a pain land for any color, but you can only do it if you have an artifact, else it taps for 1 colorless. Port Town. Next, we have a couple of ways to put certain specific artifacts from your graveyard back onto the top of your library. Academy Ruins is a repeatable effect. Buried Ruin, you have to sack it, but you can put a target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Next, we have a few checklands, utility lands. Kori Mountain Monastery, it enters tapped unless you control a plains or an island. It adds 1 red mana, but in a pinch for 4 mana, you can exile the top card of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So it can take away one of the top cards you may not want to play right now. Agna Kella, this land enters tapped unless you control a basic land. It adds blue mana, but for 3 mana, you can tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. Once again, manipulate the top of your library. Castle Vantress allows you to scry. Archway of Innovation enters tapped unless you have an island, adds blue mana, and then for blue and tapping it, the next spell you cast has improvised, so your artifacts can help cast you the spell. Then I run a few basics. To recap, Elsha is a very powerful commander. One other thing that to consider based on your meta is look at cards such as Mithril Coat to give Elsha indestructible at instant speed. Voltaic Key to get better value out of your mana rocks, especially Mana Vault and Thron Dynamo, for example. Mystic Forge is a second Elsha-like effect. You can look at the top of your library at any time. You may cast artifact or colorless spells from the top. Also, you can tap it, pay 1 life to exile the top card of your library. Cards such as Cloak of Mists give Elsha unblockable. Except for black and green, you can run the remaining 9 fetches to keep manipulating the top of your library. Cards such as the Panorama Lands, which actually add 1 colorless, which is actually enough for most of the cards in the deck. You can also sack it for 1 mana to go fetch. Give me any suggestions here. This is a deck that I constantly refine. It is a lot of fun to play. And once again, a shout out to Commander's Quarters, where I originally saw this quite a few years ago, and I built a first budget Elsha deck from there, and then I have tuned it over time with the cards I have. Thank you so much for watching.